Hello everyone, Data here, and welcome to the third induction ceremony to the Data782 Hall of Fame. The DHOF is our channel Hall of Fame, which highlights some of the greatest storylines we've had in our franchise mode series on the channel over the years, including nominees from over a dozen different series that range from as far back as NHL 18 all the way to our most recently completed series on NHL 24. From all of those series, I've compiled a list of our biggest legends from each one and put them on a ballot for all of you to vote on. Through our 2 inaugurations so far, which can be watched by checking out the cards in the top right corner, we have added 15 members to our channel Hall of Fame, and we will now be adding 6 more. Those 15 members so far are Jace Pac-Man Wakabayashi, Chad Lucius, Leon Draisaitl, Connor Bedard, Philip Lindbergh, Boris the Latvian Leviathan Kalinin, Peyton Hollywood Wilm, Kyle Wood, Eli Tolvanen, Quinn Hughes from the San Jose Sharks series, Jonathan Drouin, Nathan McKinnon, Mackenzie Blackwood, Harrison Avery, and Cale Makar. Now, to try and avoid recency bias in who gets selected to the Hall for this third inauguration, as 2 NHL 24 series were added to this ballot, I implemented a new system for this vote which classified any non-NHL 24 series as a, quote, old series, and the Canucks and Starfleet series from NHL 24 as, quote, new series. Voters can only vote for a maximum of 3 nominees from each category, and from these votes, 6 inductees were chosen with a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 coming from each category, thus allowing for a 2-4, 3-3, or 4-2 split between the 2 categories instead of it being something like 0-6. And by the way, I would encourage you to join the Discord server in anticipation of our next induction ceremony, as over there, I've written and will continue to write a blurb on each nominee so that you can always cast an informed ballot. The link for our server is in the description, and all 700 of us would love to have you. So without further ado, let's begin the ceremony. For this third induction class, 51 ballots of votes on 6 members were cast, and of the 78 nominees, 66 received at least 1 vote, and 37 received at least 3 votes or more, so it really shows the large range of voting, and I very much thank everyone who took the time to cast a ballot. Now, obvious spoilers for multiple series ahead, and let's get started. The first member of this induction class and the 16th member of the DHOF comes from our San Jose Sharks series back on NHL 23, and with votes on 15.7% of the ballots cast, we are proud to welcome Nico Heikkila to the Hall. Nico Heikkila joins the DHOF as the latest draft pick to ever be inducted, as he was drafted in the 7th round at 209th overall in the 2028 draft in our Sharks series. With 1 pick left in the 2028 draft, it came down to 3 players with low lead potential, and due to one being a grinder and one being 19, we said, hey, let's settle on Heikkila, who is an 18-year-old two-way forward. Heikkila was a 50 overall at the draft with no category of attributes above 1 star, and upon being drafted, I said, quote, nothing standing out, no problem, throw him in the system and see what happens. You never know which one of these guys might grow into something special someday. And boy, was I right. Over the next 2 seasons, Heikkila continued to develop overseas, and by the 2030 offseason, at 20 years of age, Heikkila had miraculously jumped to an 80 overall with 5-star puck skills. With this incredible growth, we signed Heikkila to his entry-level contract, and by the time the start of the 2030-31 season rolled around, he grew even more to an 82 overall, which created some real difficulty for us in the forward core as we had to start him off on the 4th line. That 4th line, however, ended up providing a surprising amount of offense as Heikkila and his line mates combined for 80 points, of which Heikkila contributed 8 goals and 22 assists in his rookie year. That saw him grow to an 83 overall while also adding 10 points in 28 games on our run to a disappointing Game 7 loss in the Stanley Cup final. But if you watched our Sharks series, you know that the story doesn't end there. After his rookie season, Heikkila continued to grow to a now 85 overall, which saw him get promoted to the 3rd line and score 73 points in what would be a President's Trophy winning season for the Sharks, scoring those 20 goals and 53 assists while averaging just over 15 minutes of ice time per game. Heikkila would then go point per game in the playoffs, scoring 24 points in 24 games as the Sharks won what would be their first Stanley Cup of 8 over a 14-year span. Aside from all of the rings, however, Heikkila continued to grow and was an 86 overall in the top 6 with multiple X factors as soon as his 3rd NHL season. And once he logged 60 assists in his first season with increased ice time, we knew that we could trust him for the long haul, as he never dropped lower than the 2nd line for the rest of his career. Over the next decade and a half or so, Heikkila played both first and second line minutes, growing as high as an 89 overall, and winning those 7 other Stanley Cup rings, as I mentioned, to give him a total of 8 by series end. And I say by series end because when the franchise mode ended after the maximum of 25 years, Heikkila was still an 84 overall, coming off of a 79-point season, so I'm sure he could have played at least 1 or 2 more. Nonetheless, at the time of series end, Haikila was 37 years old and had played 17 seasons in San Jose, scoring 263 goals and 1,058 assists for a total of 1,321 points over 1,391 games played in San Jose. Not to mention also being a plus 477, as well as scoring 259 points in 293 postseason games. The Finnish Zetterberg was an 8-time Stanley Cup champion and one of the greatest gems in franchise mode history, and we now elevate him to his rightful place, forever enshrined in channel history. Next up in this induction class, having also received votes on 15.7% of ballots cast, is a member from our Penguins series on NHL 23, Berkely Catton. Now, our mandate in the Penguins series was to win another cup ASAP before Crosby, Malkin, and Letang retired. After losing in 7 in round 1 of the year number 1 playoffs, we had to start thinking about young pieces to help us both in the now and in the future. At the 2024 draft, we made a massive 3-team trade which gave us, among other pieces, the 9th overall pick in the draft. With that selection, we drafted Berkely Catton, who was a 73 overall with medium elite potential. We let Catton grow in 2024-25, which saw the Penguins lose in a heartbreaking 6-game Stanley Cup final, but Catton was an 82 overall by time 2025-26 began, which earned him a second-line role with Crosby and Malkin as his line mates. In his rookie season, Catton put up a very respectable 44 points in the regular season before understandably taking a background role in a crazy 2026 postseason that, yes, saw him score only 2 goals and 1 assist in 19 games, but had him be a part of a Stanley Cup championship team. Over the following years, Catton became a playmaking machine during his time in Pittsburgh as he quickly grew to have 99 passing and 5-star puck skills, cementing him as our first-line left wing, which saw him spend many prosperous years centered by Leon Draisaitl. Catton would go on to score multiple point-per-game plus seasons, becoming an alternate captain along the way as a pillar in the organization. At the end of the Penguins series, which was just 15 years in length, Catton was 32 years old and had scored 246 goals and 805 assists for 1,051 points in just 1,066 games as a Penguin, being a part of 6 Stanley Cup winning teams and capturing 2 Conn Smythe trophies for his efforts. But wait, there's a little more to Catton's story, as although the series ended after 15 seasons, I did do 5 more seasons as a Discord exclusive, so if you want to know how Catton's career really ended, the playmaker played 5 more seasons in Pittsburgh and won 1 more Stanley Cup, retiring after year number 20 at the age of 37, having scored 1,511 points in 1,476 games, all as a Penguin. Catton also scored 316 points in 334 postseason games, and even won the Lady Byng in his final season. One of the recipients of the torch from the old guard in Pittsburgh made good on his opportunity with 7 rings, 2 Conn Smythes, and a place in the DHOF. We move on now to our first inductee from an NHL 24 series, and having received votes on 31.4% of the ballots cast, we welcome from the Vancouver Canucks series, Stefan the Silver Surfer Markstrom. Named the Silver Surfer for his wonderful silver afro, Markstrom was also known as the Swedish Chef because he was exceptional when it came to dishing the puck. Now, Markstrom did not begin his career with us in Vancouver, as he was actually drafted first overall in 2025 by the Montreal Canadiens. However, the Habs also picked at number 3 in 2025, and with that selection, drafted James Hagens. Hagens made the jump directly to the AHL, got top NHL minutes soon after, and was signed to a major extension, all the while Markstrom stayed in Europe after being drafted, later played fewer NHL minutes than Hagens, despite great point totals, and was an unsigned RFA on the trade block over the 2029 offseason as a 90 overall at 22 years of age among a plethora of young centers in Montreal. We pounced on the opportunity, trading a first, a second, and Cal Ritchie to the Canadiens for Markstrom's RFA rights, signed him to a long-term deal, slot him into our top 6 right away, and the rest is history. In his first year with us, Markstrom finished second in team scoring, registering 75 assists and 91 points in what would become the first of many years alongside fellow countryman, sniper Fredrik Lundqvist. As part of the Flying Swedes in Vancouver, and more specifically the Swedish Meatballs line, Markstrom's time in Vancouver was split as the 1B behind Elias Pettersson to start, and once Petey got older, he inherited both the first-line center role as well as the captaincy. The Swedish chef spent 15 seasons in Vancouver and accomplished 8 seasons of 100 plus points and even 4 seasons of 80 plus assists, as he scored a total of 348 goals and 1,055 assists for 1,430 points over 1,219 games played as a Canuck. Add in his Montreal numbers, and Markstrom retired with over 1,200 assists and over 1,600 points. He also scored 55 goals and 186 assists for 241 points in 239 postseason games as a Canuck. And with all of those numbers, you may be surprised to hear that Markstrom won just 1 Hart, 1 Ted Lindsay, and 2 Stanley Cups, despite a Hall of Fame resume. But the numbers speak for themselves, and Stefan Markstrom is a slam dunk first ballot DHOF nominee. We don't have to go very far for our next inductee, as very fittingly, with votes on 33.3% of the ballots cast, our next member elected to the DHOF is Elias Pettersson. Drafted 5th overall in 2017, we inherited the Canucks and needing to convince Elias Pettersson to sign on long-term and to be the pillar of our future. After being convinced by a 47-win season in year 1, Pettersson decided to sign his long-term extension with us in the 2024 offseason, and he was certainly glad that he did, as we won our first Stanley Cup in franchise history just 4 years later, and then again 3 years after that with Pettersson capturing the Conn Smythe with 14 goals and 32 points in just 22 games. Now, Pettersson's story doesn't end there, as although his overall decline due to age over the years, he was the definition of consistency and longevity, playing 23 years in Vancouver and 18 with us in the franchise mode, accomplishing multiple 80-plus point seasons even when his ice time dipped below 15 minutes per game. In his entire career, Pettersson scored 658 goals and 1,094 assists for 1,752 points across 1,796 games played before retiring as captain at the age of 42 in 2041. In the playoffs, Pettersson scored 95 goals and 160 assists for 255 points in 268 games played, while capturing 3 Stanley Cups, that 1 Conn Smythe trophy, and of course, his real-world Calder trophy. There have been real-world players who have been acquired and have become legends for us in the past, but to inherit Elias Pettersson and watch him become the greatest Canuck of all time, with all those crazy longevity numbers, putting up point-per-game seasons in like a third-line role, that was just something special. And for the results that he demonstrated over 23 years in Vancouver, we welcome him to the Hall. Sticking with NHL 24, we now turn to our livestream expansion draft series with the San Francisco Starfleet, and with votes on 37.3% of the ballots cast, we welcome Avery the Professor McIntyre to the Hall. Ranked 13th overall in the 2024 draft, McIntyre scored 64 goals and 117 points in just 67 games for the U.S. development system, and caught our eye so much that we decided to trade up for him and drafted him with the 9th overall pick. As an 80 overall with 5-star shooting and medium elite potential out of the draft, McIntyre spent his first year in the AHL due to a crowded center core in the NHL and scored 48 goals to let us know that he couldn't be held down for long. McIntyre then centered the second line in his rookie season that saw him score 49 goals and 72 points on his way to a well-deserved Calder trophy, earning himself the Professor title, named after Professor McIntyre from Star Trek Enterprise, since the series was, of course, Star Trek based, due to his teaching of the league, how a real goal scorer scores. McIntyre's rookie season was just the beginning, however, as after losing in the Cup final in his rookie season, McIntyre put Starfleet on his back, won the Rocket with 56 goals in his sophomore season to lead the league, and was instrumental in Starfleet's first Stanley Cup championship in just our 4th year after entering the league, as McIntyre scored 21 goals and 31 points in just 24 games. McIntyre quickly became the pillar of our franchise, joining the first line in 2027 and inheriting the captaincy from Elias Lindholm in 2033, which he would hold on to until his retirement in 2044. McIntyre played in 19 seasons with San Francisco, appearing in 1,551 games while scoring 986 goals, 848 assists, and 1,834 points. He scored as many as 70 goals in a season, and in this universe by 2044, McIntyre would have retired as the 3rd highest goal scorer in NHL history. He'd be tied with Alex Ovechkin for the most 50-goal seasons in NHL history as well, and assumedly tied for 3rd all-time for most 100-point seasons in NHL history with 9. In the playoffs, the Professor logged 170 goals and 147 assists for 317 points over 308 games, played over the course of 4 Stanley Cup championships. McIntyre won the Calder, Lady Byng, Hart, Ted Lindsay, and Art Ross trophies all just once in his career, and surprisingly just 2 Rocket Richards due to stiff competition despite the almost 1,000 goals in his career, and also 2 Conn Smythe trophies to go along with those 4 Stanley Cup rings. For a career as storied as McIntyre's, there are so many other storylines I'd love to talk about that happened within the series, but with just what I've told you over the last few minutes, it's clear to see that McIntyre not only joins the Hall as an honored member, but is one of the greatest of all time. We come now to the 6th and final inductee of this 3rd DHOF class and return to the Vancouver Canucks series for a player who also received votes on 37.3% of the ballots cast. It is my great pleasure to welcome a player who may go down in my personal top 10 of all time, and that is Hunter Jones. Of our now 21 members of the DHOF, Hunter Jones is just the 4th goalie to be inducted, which tells you how rare it is for one to be honored. To tell you why Hunter Jones is joining the DHOF, let's roll things back to the 2027-28 season with the Canucks, which was year number 5 in that series. Barely clinging on to a wildcard spot at the 2028 trade deadline, our 3-headed goaltending team of Casey DeSmith, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and Arturs Shilovs was sinking, as DeSmith, who was the obvious starter of the 3 performance-wise, was beginning to struggle more and more and had no one to rely on behind him. To try and basically just find someone reliable enough who could give DeSmith a breather, we took a long look at the goaltending options around the league and noticed that the Minnesota Wild had 27-year-old Hunter Jones playing in the AHL as an 84 overall. Up until this point, Jones had made only 8 NHL appearances since being drafted in 2019 and had to be desperate to see NHL action. His results in the AHL seemed decent enough to fill a backup role, and as an 84 overall signed on at league minimum for another season after this one, it seemed like a what's the worst that could happen kind of move. We flipped Shilovs and some other pieces to Minnesota for Jones and crossed our fingers for a playoff berth. Not long after the trade, DeSmith went down due to injury, which made Jones the temporary starter. Jones would appear in 13 games over the final 20 of the regular season, including a huge first-star effort in a 5-1 win in Game 82, which allowed us to squeak into the final playoff spot thanks to a 5th-level tiebreaker. Yes, you heard me right. Jones ultimately logged a record of 6-5-2 with a .904 save percentage and 2.84 goals against average, and even 1 shutout, headed into a difficult playoff matchup with DeSmith still injured. In the playoffs, facing the Western Conference winning Oilers, Jones continued as our starter on a we'll-see basis since DeSmith was still injured, but what he ended up doing was, well, historic. In round 1, Jones registered not 1, but 2 shutouts against the Oilers, going 4-2-1 with a .939 save percentage and 1.98 goals against average to win us the series in 7 games. But the magic wasn't done there, as Jones put up basically identical numbers with 2 more shutouts to sweep the Ducks in round 2, then even better numbers with 2 more shutouts to beat the Avalanche in a 6-game round 3, and finally 2 more shutouts in the 5-game Stanley Cup final to end the 2028 postseason with what will be remembered as perhaps the greatest goaltending performance in postseason NHL history, as he posted a record of 16-4-2, which included a 1.95 goals against average, .942 save percentage, and an NHL record 8 shutouts on our way to the first Stanley Cup in franchise history. The game didn't give him the Conn Smythe, but we know that he deserved it for what was probably the greatest postseason performance that I've ever seen from any player in any franchise mode ever. After this historic run, Jones continued on as our starter and remained as a Canuck for the rest of his career, even when he had to transition to a backup role, securing a regular season record of 228 wins, 134 losses, and 39 overtime or shootout losses, with 28 shutouts, a .907 save percentage, and 2.92 goals against average in Vancouver, and also a playoff record of 53, 24, and 8, with a .918 save percentage, 2.71 goals against average, and 13 shutouts. A pure machine who won another Stanley Cup ring with us in 2031 and will forever be remembered in the Hall as one of the true legends of channel history. And that does it, everyone. There are your next 6 members of the Data782 Hall of Fame. I hope that you enjoyed the little walk down memory lane, and I would encourage you to check out some of the series that were mentioned in this ceremony if you haven't already. There are tons of series to binge through here on the channel, which will also make you a more informed voter once the time comes for the next DHOF induction. The best way to keep an eye out for that is by being in the Discord server, which is linked in the description, as all nominees have a little blurb in there that you can read if you'd like. And speaking of likes, please do leave one if you enjoyed the video, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already to be made aware of all of our uploads here on the channel as we gear up for what will be a very busy and exciting 2025. Thank you once again for taking the time to watch, and I look forward to the many more stories and legends that are to come from the series that we will build together.